there's a few items under Mayor's Communication 5A, B, and C, and they all will probably be somewhat tied to Patrick McCauley's kind of debriefing of where we're at with the DUA. And have you guys, Patrick, have you been here since we've all taken office?
No, I haven't been there.
Everyone may be new, so why don't we do a quick just roundtable for those that don't know Patrick McCauley. Do you want to start, Madam Chair?
Linda Parker Craig. Angela Carl.
Ed Bursaw.
Tim Wood.
Cindy Ballard.
Charlie Johnson.
Linda Roberts.
Alex Garza.
Thank you.
And Patrick has represented the city for many years. I'm afraid to guess, Patrick.
First creepy administration.
So many years.
Wow.
How do you want to start on this, Patrick? Do you want to just give a quick overview of the DUA and maybe take on some questions?
I'm happy to do that, Mayor, and maybe the best way is to provide a little historical perspective for the council tonight, and then bring it right down to the present day and the issues that we're facing right now. I want to go back a ways. I want to go back to 1939. 1939, the treatment plant in Midland, Pennsylvania was constructed. Provided primary treatment to a small handful of communities downriver. The total cost of that investment was a little over $2 million. Wayne County put in about $1.1 million. There was a federal grant for the balance, about $980,000. In the early 1960s, the treatment plant was expanded to provide both primary and secondary treatment to 12 communities in the downriver area. One community who did not join in the early 60s was the city of Riverview. March 1 of 1962, Wayne County entered into a service agreement, again with Riverview being added in 1973. The purpose of this service agreement and next plan expansion was to provide broader treatment to comply with some of the state mandates on Clean Water Act. Communities paid $18 million at that point to expand the treatment plant. Wayne County paid nothing. In 1987, the APA sued Wayne County, claiming violations of the Clean Water Act. Wayne County filed a motion to bring in all the communities, saying that in order to effect complete relief, to do the cleanup as appropriate, the communities had to be brought in as well. That case resulted in a consent judgment in 1994 before Judge Bikens, which I negotiated on behalf of the city. That consent judgment called for substantial improvements to the Downriver system to bring it into compliance with the Clean Water Act. The price tag for that for the local communities was in excess of $250 million. And those improvements were completed in the early 2000s. So based upon this major investment that the communities had made as part of this consent judgment, they wanted to have more of a say in terms of how the plant was operated, the efficiencies, and to make sure, in fact, it was being operated properly, so we didn't run into another situation for violations of the Clean Water Act. Communities were concerned that Wayne County had not done everything they were supposed to do as far as making sure the plant operated properly, and we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen again. And so in 2001, Wayne County and the 13 communities agreed to form what was called a Joint Management Committee, a JMC. The purpose of the JMC was to give the communities a more direct advisory role in the operation and management of the downriver system, and also to try and put a cap on the indirect costs that Wayne County was charging the downriver system as a cost control measure. This JMC agreement was memorialized in a document called a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU. That MOU was put in place in 2001 and has continued up through various revisions down to today's date. In 2010, the communities were in the process of deciding how they wanted to go forward with further discussions with Wayne County. In 1962, the communities entered into a service agreement with Wayne County that had a 50-year term on it. With the expiration looming in March of 2012, the community said, how are we going to go forward with a new negotiation with Wayne County? And so as a result of that, they formed an authority known as the Downriver Utilities Wastewater Authority, or DUWA. And there the purpose of that authority, the new authority, by 12 to 13 communities, Lincoln Park City on the sideline at that time, was to first try and negotiate a new service agreement with Wayne County. But Second, if that was not successful, to in essence try and take over the system from Wayne County going forward. March 1, 2012, the service agreement expires. We've been in negotiations with Wayne County since 2010, trying to get a new service agreement in place without any success. There were a couple of key sticking points in terms of our negotiations with Wayne County. One was, who owns this system? The community said, we own it. We've put in over $380 million into the system since 1962. There are assets. We ought to have final say in terms of decision making. The county said, well, not so fast. We think we own it. We formed it back in the 1930s and in 1962. But let's talk about it. Those negotiations continued. We finally got to a point in 2014 when we were pretty close to getting a service agreement negotiated and put to bed. In May of 2014, we hit a little road bump, and that is when Wayne County filed their first deficit elimination plan for the state of Michigan to address some of the financial difficulties they were having. One aspect of this deficit elimination plan was to sell the Downriver system to a third party. The number that they plugged into what that sales price ought to be was $120 million, and when we asked them, where did you get that number? Their response was, well, that's kind of what we need to plug the hole we've got in our budget. No basis for it, in fact, and we said, we're not interested at that price. And indeed, a couple of weeks later, on June 2nd, 2014, we sent a letter to the state treasurer objecting to the county's attempts to monetize this system on our backs. We said, we already own it. We've already paid over $380 million to approve it. The county's paid zero since 1962. We said the county has no equity in the system. They have no capacity in the system. They have no legal authority to sell the system. They have no legal authority to use the proceeds from our system to plug the holes in their general deficit fund. We also told the state treasurer that any kind of an increase in price when we were required to pay would result in the skyrocketing of rates to the residents of Taylor and the Downriver communities. We were very concerned with the fact that the county may in fact have been using our reserve fund. Again, a fund that the communities had paid in to a pooled account of Wayne County to look for maintenance, capital improvement expenditures, emergency repairs. That number was about $37 million. We told the state treasurer we want to make sure that that money is protected. The major concern being that in the event of a bankruptcy in Wayne County, you might have a trustee coming in and simply say, well, this money is in a Wayne County pooled account. It's Wayne County assets. We can use it however we want to. So that was another concern that we had. But again, we continued our negotiations with Wayne County, and December last year, 2014, we finally had a document which we felt the communities could approve and that the Wayne County Commission could approve. And in fact, on December 18 last year, the Wayne County Commission approved the new service agreement. And the communities at that point began the process of getting individual community approval for the service agreement going forward. New administration came on board after the first of the year, the Evans administration. And on February 20, CEO Evans refused to approve the new service agreement. He said it wasn't an agreement, it was simply an offer, and he had the authority under the county charter to simply not accept the offer and to revoke it. In the meantime, we discovered that back in May of 2014, Wayne County had in fact been borrowing from our reserve fund to plug holes in their general deficit. In April of 2015, CEO Evans issued his new Wayne County Recovery Plan, which again called for monetizing and selling the Downriver system. But now they were talking about selling it back to the communities. And the purchase price number was about half of what the original was, and that's now, we're talking about $65 million. Where that number comes from, how it was established, is anybody's guess at this point. And so what did we do? Again, we sent a letter to the county treasurer saying, we want to have our system reserve monies be restricted, segregated, set aside in a separate enterprise fund, and be used only for and exclusively for the Downriver system. Why? Because it was our money. We contributed every penny of it. That letter was sent on June 2nd. We're still waiting for a reply. On June 17 of this year, the CEO sent a letter to the state requesting declaring a financial emergency for Wayne County. And now we're getting really concerned about what's going to happen with the system with our reserve funds. So again, a week later, on June 25th of this year, we again sent a letter to the state treasurer, raising the same concerns we had raised before. We understood that a consent agreement was in the process of being negotiated between the state and Wayne County. We asked for a seat at the table to have those negotiations. To my knowledge, we've not received a response yet from the state treasurer, but another system, the Rouge Valley system, sent a comparable letter to the state treasurer. And they did get a response basically saying, well, let's let this whole financial emergency thing play out. Let's see what happens with the consent agreement, and we'll be in touch. I'm estimating that we'll get that same kind of letter back from the state treasurer, basically saying, sit tight, and we'll call you when we want to call you.